Hello, and welcome to Dev Roulette Live, the premiere. And if you can see everyone now, I hope you can. You now have revealed to you who our mystery guests are. I am very excited to have had both Niles and Andy accept the invitation for this first series. And um, if for those who don't know either of them, so you probably at least know Andy. He's a little vocal on Twitter, at least, and we love him for it. But Andy, you can find
Only a little
at
bit.
I'm gonna pop links in the chat here, but Andy you can find on Twitter as Piccalilly, and you can also review his personal, website and find out how to get in contact with him as well. I popped that in the chat. And the one more link I will drop, and Andy, you're welcome to drop more. But most recently, Andy was the primary writer, that hopefully I'm saying that correctly, for the Learn CSS project, which is really super fantastic and very relevant to our discussion
Well,
today.
thank you.
So I wanted to include that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Any thoughts to add before I move over to Niles?
I'm only a little bit badly behaved on Twitter. I'm normally a very good boy. Don't cause any trouble whatsoever on there.
It's all good.
Be boring if I didn't, wouldn't
Yeah.
it?
So Niles is I'm gonna pop your Twitter in the chat here. Supreme Bean, which I super love.
Yeah.
And Niles is a little more on the designer side, at least certainly than myself, and has a very super cool website that you can check out in the chat as a slider for you to determine how much CSS you show, or that is loaded for the design, which is very cool. And I became a little more familiar with Niles recently because he is a co-organizer of CSS Cafe, which I also just put into the chat. So Niles, anything else to add for yourself?
No, not. I think you covered mostly. If you see my website, you find all things that I've done, thing that I wrote, and so on. I did some talks here. Not as active as Andy is, but at least I've written something. Yeah.
Very good. Folks in the chat, let me know if the audio is okay, the audio levels. I want to make sure everyone can be heard since this is a discussion. We are going to go just about 40 minutes or so. And okay, audio is great. Awesome. And so if you caught the kind of promos I was doing about this, the idea was, first of all, that we had mystery guests. Obviously, that's been revealed. But the second part of this is that we have a wheel of topics that we will be able to use to help guide our discussion today. And so I'm going to do a little transition over to that screen. So bear with me. I'm running webcams through Zoom, which means I have to like resize windows and everything. So one moment, please.
Realize we can't see it, so you could just make up the topics, couldn't you? We'd be none otherwise.
Could do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
You're going to be able to see them in just a
Oh, yeah.
minute.
What are your thoughts on CGI scripts?
Love it. All right. So here we have our fabulous wheel, and created in 100% CSS. Thank you very much. No, I just that was a fun creative challenge earlier this week. But anyway, so I'm just because now's your webcam is first, I'm going to have you be the first one. The way it works is I hover over it and it's going to spin. So you tell me when to stop and we will see what topic it points to. If it lands on a line, we're going to choose the topic below the line. So are you ready?
Okay. I think I am. I don't see the wheel actually, but I think I can say stop at some point.
Yes. All right. Good point. Yeah. Yes. OBS versus Zoom.
But it's okay.
Not working.
Can you use our imaginations for designers? Yeah.
It's beautiful. All right, here we go. I'm going to start. Stop whenever you'd like.
And stop.
All right. Our first topic by a hair is algorithmic layout. So,
Oh, wow.
yes, which I think is really perfect for both of you. These topics are weighted towards hopefully what you both are comfortable talking about, by the way. So
Yeah.
they're mystery topics. You did not know them ahead of time, but yes, we want to have a good, positive discussion. So yeah, what are your thoughts on algorithmic layouts?
Oh, you go first, Nils.
Okay. Well, these algorithmic layouts are, I think, are kind of layouts that we produce with clever techniques, with things that we did mostly when container queries were not ready. Some of them may not be needed anymore. You can find better ways now when container queries will be there. But mostly it's just very robust layouts that you can use without needing to do any media query, and it just great thing is in the end it just works. You can put some of these things together, and you have wherever the content is loaded, it will be displayed, and you have boxes next to each other or underneath each other, depending on the space that is available, which I think is just awesome. And you can combine these and nest these things and do some very creative things. What I think is a really interesting part here, that it involves a little bit of kind of uh, visual, visual logic that you need, that okay, this is 100%, and if you divide, subtract a value from it and multiply it with something, so it's a very kind of thinking that you need to produce this, that I think is kind of a little bit unique to what front-end designers are, for the people that are mostly on the between design and development. So they come up with these things. I think Hayden Pickering has done a lot of work in this area. Yeah, I think this is mostly what I have to say as a start.
Well, and one of the reasons I added this was because of your devil's albatross, which definitely
Yeah.
fits this topic. Would you like to explain that really briefly?
Yes, I can. Do you want to show a link to this?
Oh, good question.
I could.
Yes.
I don't know if I have it ready somewhere.
I just linked somebody to it earlier this week, but very good point. Let me readjust so I can do that.
Can send the.
Perfect. Oh, thank you, Nikki.
Okay. Yeah, the Devil's Albatross is something that is done by it's kind of a ripoff of Hayden Pickering's Holy Albatross technique, where there is the thing that you have like this threshold of a value, and you subtract the 100%. And what it does in the end is, if you have like a very typical header element on your website, where you have the logo on the left side and then 3, 4, 5 navigation items on the right side or hand side, and when you resize the window, at some point you want them to be underneath each other, and quite often as a designer I want them to be centered at this point. So I want the logo to be centered, and I also want the navigation links to be centered underneath. And this is something that most of the time you will have this in a full screen thing, so that it is the full viewport. So you could easily do this with a media query, because it is response to the viewport width. But you can do it without a media query. And I had at one point, I made a website, and I shortly to the end, I realized that I did not use any media query at all. And I said, well, there's this one thing in the header that I wanted to do. And then I said, there has to be a solution for this. And this is what I did in the end. And I don't know if you pointed to the blog post or to the code pen. But if you want to understand how this works, I wrote something about this.
Yeah, Nick, thank you again for popping the link in the chat. And then what I have on screen right now, I clicked through that to the code pen and kind of demonstrated the resize there. So definitely
Perfect.
folks check this out. And yeah, it's a really handy technique to add to your toolbox. But yeah, we'll flip over to Andy. What are your thoughts on algorithmic layout and work that you've done with it?
Well, so this is me and Ed did a lot of this stuff in every layout, and algorithmic layout is the sort of thing that sort of glued us both together with this. Like we've both sort of been talking about it for a while. The way I see it is that it's really easy to sort of pixel push a front end together and try and make things look as perfect as you can in all sizes and all shapes and all contexts. But what you introduce when you do that is fragility, and Nils touched on this before then as well. Like if you present some guidance to the browser rather than like distinct rules, the browser is going to do a better job of picking the right thing to do in that right time. You never know what someone's going to view your site on, or how they've got their browser set up, or there's all sorts of things that you have no control over. So the best thing to do is to sort of say, look, if you can sit side by side with each other, that's sweet. But if the content, or if the viewport, or if something is greater than this, or if something runs out of space here, just snap onto 2 lines. It's all good. No biggie. And the person that views your site is almost certainly not going to notice that the layout was supposed to be like 3 columns or whatnot. What they would notice is if you like pixel pushed it to within an inch of its life, and then you got like a weird middle case where, let's say you said, okay, at this breakpoint, sit side by side and put margin on the left and take margin off the top, and then there might be like this real weird middle point where the margin doesn't get set, and then you've just got like this weird like half staggered layout, and then they'll be like, oh, what, this looks broken. And that's the last thing you want, is the layout to look broken. I'd rather it didn't look as perfect as in my eyes, but it worked, rather than everyone get the same Photoshop composite that I designed in the first place. It's old school. It's something that we've been sort of cursed with forever in the web. Like this whole concept of pixel perfection, where the web's like the most flexible and volatile context out there. We really don't give ourselves any breaks, So it really helps. It really helps with that big time, the way I see it.
Well, I'm scrolling through every layout, and some content is available freely if you're not familiar with it, and some content is locked until you're paid. But it is a super worthwhile purchase, and you can certainly get a feel for, this is not about just a solution, but also teaching you a lot of really important stuff about how this layout comes together. So definitely awesome resource. I will throw my own hat in the ring really briefly. I talked about some things related to algorithmic layout at my CSS Cafe talk. So that is an 1.5-hour talk, because given the platform, I will talk forever about CSS. But to me, algorithmic layout has kind of evolved a lot for how I approach things. In my solutions, you'll see me use a lot of like viewport units and CSS functions like min and max. And so that talk will get you more familiar with those if you are currently not familiar. So any last words, or shall we pick a new topic?
Stop pixel pushing your designs and let the browser do the work for you, and you'll be much happier and healthier for it.
Very true. Couldn't agree more.
Live, laugh, clamp. Yeah.
Oh no. Now we need t-shirts. All right. All right. So Andy, I have the wheel up on screen again, and if you're ready, I'll get it spinning.
Spin the wheel, Steph.
All right, here we go.
Right, stop.
Oh, perfect. Learning CSS is our next topic. Andy, I feel like you should tip off this one.
It's been they consumed my entire being for the majority of this year. So what do you want to know? Like, is in like how to learn CSS, and so that I've just done a course for web dev with some incredibly talented people, and we sort of the whole idea was like we present really fundamentals here, and then we present it with as many demos and examples and little tidbits and knowledge as we can to give you the core foundational knowledge. And I think that's something you need to do with CSS. And I think before that there wasn't much content that did that that we could sort of see. I'm sort of torn though personally. So I don't learn very well like that. I learn in a more practical sense. So I learned CSS, for example, because I was a proper designer. You know, I didn't write any code. I used to hand off over my PhDs to developers and to send them back, and I was like, what the hell is this? You know, it looks nothing like what I've given you. And I do sort of, you know, sort of ironic based on what I've literally just said about algorithmic layout, but these were the fonts weren't even right, you know, even the basics. So I learned CSS because I got fed up working with developers. So I started learning to be a developer so I could build my own designs and do them properly. And the rest is history. But the point I'm making is that I learned CSS by brute force and saying, I want this to look like this. How do I do that? I want this to look like this. How do I do that? The plus point of when I learned CSS is we only had one viewport to worry about, which is desktop. So it was really easy to do that. And I just basically absolutely positioned everything on the screen. And I was happy as anything. But now I think it's more important to learn fundamentals, because I think if you learn fundamentals, you learn to write less CSS. So the beauty of that is that if you understand how the browser works and how the browser is actually doing things, and that's specifically about the things that people often say is hard about CSS, so the cascade, specificity, which is a word I can't say, and inheritance. If you can grok those three, especially, and I suppose the box model as well, then you're in really good form to be able to do pretty much whatever you want with CSS, especially with layout that we've got these days as well, with grid and flexbox. I think it's if you can learn those fundamentals early as possible, then understanding what you need to search for in Google, especially, is a big deal. And then build websites, build lots and lots and lots of websites, loads of things. Just put really weird ideas and try and make them in CSS, and you'll get really good at it really quick.
Yes, very pro experimentation.
Yeah, just mess around, have fun, have loads of fun, and then you'll discover some real weird stuff, and then before you know it, you'll be building some like rock solid front ends before you know it.
Definitely. What are your thoughts?
Quite the same. What I think is quite interesting here is I learned CSS for the exact same reasons. I wanted to do my own websites back in the early 2000s, and I said, okay, I want to be on this internet as well, and I want to know how to do this, and I didn't want to give my Photoshop designs to some black box where it comes out in a funny way or something like this. And I think if you're like this, like intrinsically motivated to learn CSS, then you will find solutions. Because sometimes I've seen this so often that you do something and then some developer tells you, no, this is not possible. And I said, are you sure this is not possible? And then you want to find out. And my basic example for this is that for quite a long time, designers in the companies where I worked, they left using blend modes to use in their designs. And then at some point they stopped because they were told it's not possible to do blend modes with CSS. Nobody told them that this is not true anymore. So they still don't use any blend modes, even though it's quite widely supported, and it has been for some years now. So if you really want to find the boundaries in CSS, then it's, I think, a lot easier to learn CSS than if your interest is more in database and all this stuff, and you just need some things to make it appear a little more nicer than just plain HTML. But then your motivation is different, and then I think you might have a hard time learning CSS.
Super true. That's really interesting that both of you kind of had the path to CSS of being designers and essentially wanting to make sure that it got translated correctly.
Yeah.
I love that.
Well, with enough bad front-end developers, yeah, to just do it myself.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, I'm very pro, like I said, experimentation, and definitely has guided a lot of what I do. And I joked a few months ago that I don't create resources for other people. I create them for myself to refer to. So, I mean, I think the second part of that is, some way to document what you've been learning and hopefully have a reference of that output. But all good stuff. Just double checking the chat here. Very positive comments about the conversation happening.
Good.
Cool. All right. Nils, your turn for the wheel. I will spin it when you're ready.
I'm totally ready.
All right, here it goes.
Let's do this.
Okay. Stop it.
All right. Oh, we landed on Spinner's Choice.
Oh, blimey.
Spinner's Choice.
Yes.
Not mine will be.
This is hard. Yeah, we already covered the really interesting ones. I was not ready for this. I don't want to get too hard. I'm not saying the T word.
Yeah, be gentle on me, Nils. I don't really know what I'm talking about. So
yeah. Sorry, I cannot come up with something that would be really nice and interesting to talk about.
All right, you want to respin? We can allow that.
Yeah, I think I can respin. This is really interesting. I don't see the other options, so I would have taken one of these.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I guess I accidentally concealed that, didn't I? Oh,
yeah. It's a conspiracy here.
It is.
Yeah.
Everything, absolutely everything's a mystery to our guests. All right.
Okay.
I'll get it fired up.
Spin
Here
again.
we go. Yep, here it goes.
And stop.
Oh, it was Spinner's Choice again. I'll do the one. I'll do the one below that because we haven't done it. Which I think you'll like. Design plus dev. So kind of an extension of a little bit what you're talking about, but
yeah, design and development. As I said before, I always wanted to do my designs and I wanted to realize them, but I don't think this is you don't have to do this. I think you can still be a designer and don't write CSS, but you always have to know that someone has to do this in between. You cannot say, okay, you have like these non-coding designers and then you have non-design thinking developers, because then the gap is too wide. And for example, I always like to tell the story about how we did the animation for the website of the company I'm working on. I don't know, am I allowed to say that?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's for 9Elements, 9elements.com.
It's on your t-shirt as well.
Yeah, it's on my t-shirt here, but you cannot read this. Well, and I didn't do the design for this. It was a colleague of mine, and he was like playing with this illustration about this hand and so on. And then I told him, "Oh, this looks interesting. I got some ideas what we could do with this, and I'm thinking about some animation and about some glitch." And he was like, "No, it's not ready yet." And then I told him, "Yeah, don't worry. You can still play with your lights and do your contrasts and all your stuff. Later, I will just try something out." And then I did this, and then he liked it. And later, when he did the rest of the design, just added some lines that, okay, we could do some glitch over here and could do this. So it was like the perfect match of me telling him, this is possible, you can do this. And there's a lot of trust between him and me because he just did one layout and said, okay, this is kind of a hint. You don't have to do this in a pixel perfect, responsive, whatever way, and just trusted me to translate it to all the other screen sizes. And I don't know, he did some mid or whatever screen with, I don't remember. Yeah, so this is kind of how design and development should work together, I think.
Yeah, nice. How about yourself, Andy? Obviously, you're a
Yeah.
freelancer, so
Yeah, quite often I'll do both. I mean, so there's this thing that happened a few years ago. It doesn't seem to happen as much anymore, but you know how we get a lot of drama on tech Twitter. Design Twitter is even worse. And there was one thing that was on design Twitter years ago was like, should designers code? And that was like every weekend forever. We used to everyone would get their entire ass out over whether a designer should code or not. And it's such a silly question, because I don't that's saying that all designers are the same as each other, like they all do one thing. And I think there's value in designers that are purely creative, that come up with cool ideas, that just really push the boundaries. And then there's also equally as much value in a designer that's more code orientated and more technically orientated. You can sort of pull that together. So I think a lot of collaboration is a big plus. I mean, obviously it's hard to do if you're a freelancer on your own working on projects. I think in that context, it's very helpful to be able to do both. It does open up opportunities for you in terms of projects. But like, I'm actively looking for a creative designer to work with, someone who just does design and nothing else, who just does creative, because the years I've been doing more technical stuff, I've definitely sort of, it's chipped away at my ability to open a document and go, right, I'm just going to really go to town on this now, because I can't, because I'm constantly thinking, oh, a bit of a performance problem, or oh, this is going to be a bit of an accessibility issue, I'm just going to park it. And whereas what I'm looking for is someone who's going to test that, and then we can deliver really good quality like front ends that are also accessible, because I think that's also very possible. But yeah, if you're a designer, you should certainly not worry that you can't code if you can't code. I don't think that's a big deal. There's things that bridge the gap now anyway. There's like tools like Webflow, which actually kicks out some pretty decent front end code these days.
Oh yeah,
Stuff like that. Like, there's so many things available now. I mean, like Figma. To be fair to Figma, like, you can learn Flexbox by designing in Figma these days. Like, their auto layout thing is pretty much like a visual Flexbox tool. So there's definitely benefit in doing it, but also, if you're a really creative designer, just heed a warning that the more technical you get, the more you'll sort of, there's a risk that you might struggle a bit with creative, which is certainly where I'm at these days. Because it's just tough. It's tough to be able to like go, right, I'm just going to really blow the wind off this. I can't even not see 12 column grids anymore. They're just there in my brain straight away. Like, I don't want to do anything. It's like, all right, grid system. So yeah, it depends is the answer, as always. Learn how to talk to each other. That's the most important thing. Yeah, write emails well, and you'll be fine.
yes.
Yeah.
I've definitely dealt with that on the various scales of teams and interactions. And yeah, I definitely appreciate when the length between myself and design is very, very short.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. There are a couple questions in chat, so we can jump back to those real quick. In regards to the learning topic, and I mentioned that learning CS, or I struggle with learning CSS because there's so many different ways to do the same thing. I don't know which is the right solution. I think is a really excellent point, but I don't think it's exclusive to CSS. But let's keep it on CSS, and if you have any tips for that, working around that or working with that even.
I've got the perfect tip for that. Because I have it ingrained in my skull. To paraphrase the great Rachel Andrew, who is also ingrained in my skull from editing the CSS course, so I'm always aware of her now. If it works, it's right. That's it. That's all you need to know. Doesn't matter if you think it doesn't matter what anyone else says. Like if you build something that works great in CSS, good job. Ship it. It's done. You've done your job. There's a benefit to sort of exploring other options, but there's no right or wrong answer. It's, like if you've built something that works and it works responsively and everything's looking sweet, then you've done it. It's working. Everyone's a winner. That's it for me on that one.
Nice, love it.
I get hung up on it.
It will never stop. If I look at the code that I've written like 2-3 years ago, I was like, okay, that's funny what I thought was good back then. But still, if you don't look at the code and the website still look okay, but there are some things I say, okay, this could have been done much easier or more elegant or whatever. But you don't need to have the perfect, elegant CSS. As Andy said, if it works, it's good.
Yeah, give yourself room to grow as well, because like there's so much to learn in tech, in all languages, especially CSS. Just don't be hard on yourself. If you look back on your code in 2-3 years and you're not saying, "Oh man, I could definitely done that better," then you're not. You want to be looking back at. I look back at code 2-3 hours ago, and I'm like, "Why idiot wrote that?" And it's me, unfortunately. But it's like just take it easy on yourself. That's really a good thing to do.
Yeah. Super agree. I think just a little point to note for everyone. My first streams, there's a couple more next week. And we're gonna stay CSS focused, but I do plan to bring in folks to talk about accessibility. And I think that's the one, kind of caveat to if it works.
If it works.
Yeah. But again, experimentation is great. That's why I love CodePen or any other just excuse to play around. And the more you know about it, the better you'll be able to find a solution that not only works, but is accessible and is also readable by your team members, which that's my one extra point to add to the discussion is, can you document it or if that's, important to what you're working on. But anyway, all right, excuse me, I'm not sure if it's Anna or Anna. I have a lot of Frozen in our house, so it could be Anna. Anyway, says thanks for the tip. Also another point kind of related to where that conversation went was someone asked, can you talk a little bit about CSS performance? And I'm laughing at Ben. Yes, I said accessibility. But anyway, and if neither of you has any comments on that, that's fine too. But anything to...
I can definitely say, and this is about the learning again. I did a lot of stuff some years ago that are not really good for the performance of your site. Like the animation that I pointed to before on our website, if you have it on a little longer than your MacBook or whatever you're using, your laptop will start to heat up, and this is maybe not the best thing to do. So I would have done things differently by now. So I think there's for many things there's easier solutions where you don't need the most fancy whatever effect, because in the end people want to get some information and they want to consume it, and they just like don't want to stare at some big fancy whatever most of the time. So this is what I can say to performance.
Cool. Any extra thoughts, or we can move on to probably one last topic real quick.
Yeah, go move on a little
All
bit.
right.
Anything else?
All right. So I think Andy, I believe you're up, if I remember.
Spin the wheel.
All right.
Let's go.
Here it goes.
Stop.
Oh, we landed on the line, and we'll have to break our rule because we already did that topic. So the above the line topic is keeping up with CSS. So as in all the changes that are currently happening. And maybe we should recap what's happening for those that aren't aware, because I think that's part of it too, is not even being aware of what it is. I guess that's really what this topic is about, is how do you find out, and then how do you stay on track of what's happening and whether it impacts you. At least was in my brain when I put this on the wheel.
I think how to stay in the loop about what's going on is keep an eye on what the CSS working group are talking about. That's always good one to look at. CSS Trick, Smash and Mag, people are quite often talking about the future as well as the present, which is good. In terms of keeping up, like it's really, like you want to be learning the newest and coolest stuff. But also when you see stuff come up, don't panic and think, oh God, I'm so behind already. Like one of the good things about CSS is because it's properly standardized with, really ridiculously qualified people that work in the working group. It doesn't flip and flap around. When things happen, they happen and they happen well. Grid is a perfect example of this. There's a really sort of group effort to make it work well and to roll it out almost simultaneously across all browsers. And the rollout of that was a huge success. I still am not very good at Grid, and it came out in, was it 2017? It rolled out. I think the important thing is just be aware of things and be aware of what is possible. Container queries is a great example, right? They're probably far way off yet. But the important thing is now, because the working group are prototyping with them, in Chromium, or members of the working group are prototyping with them, it means that they're happening and they're being taken seriously. So a good thing to do with them now is just to keep an eye on what's going on. Lots of people are talking about them, see what people are building with demos. And then when they actually formally arrive in browsers, then you'll be sort of one step ahead at that point. But even at that point, we're very lucky these days that a lot of people write about content and it's very easy to find, via either RSS feeds or Twitter, if you're that way inclined. And we're in a good position with CSS. CSS seems to get a lot more positive writing about it now as well. There's a dark period on the web where there's constant Peter Griffin gifs. Whereas that gif's about as relevant as a chocolate teapot. So it's I guess it's just, again, stop panic. That seems to be my advice to everyone these days. Just stop panic. There's stuff to learn for sure, but CSS isn't going to change tomorrow. It's going to change in nice, organized steps rather than, like the JavaScript ecosystem. You could be like, oh, I better learn that, and then 6 weeks go by and it's no longer the best practice. Something else is the best practice. It's not like that in CSS. All good.
Yes,
Yeah.
all good points.
Mm.
And Niels, any extra commentary?
Yeah. I think it's quite what you need to accomplish is, I think at least, is that you be aware of what is around there. Is kind of what Andy said as well, so that okay, these things are happening, and they are somewhere around, and you don't have to learn them just directly. I think there's a lot of stuff that can be done today in other ways, but if you still did a proper 12 grid layout using nothing, not Flexbox, not grid, and it will still work if you've done it properly. So you don't have to always go with the latest thing that is going on there. And quite often, keeping up is like, for me, there's some things that I always want to have in CSS, and they are not possible. Latest thing was gap in Flexbox. I so many times I thought, okay, if I just could have had gap here, it would have been so much easier. And Firefox already implemented it like a long time ago. Not long, yeah. And yeah, this made me so happy. And I think there were folks on Twitter that tweeted about this. And yeah, when I saw this and I was so happy and retweeted it. And yeah, now I will start using it. And this is kind of how I do this. And of course, all the resources that Annie pointed to. And I have to say, well, you can always come to the CSS Cafe, where we have great speakers like we had Andy and we had Stephanie. And we will have Miriam Suzanne talking about container queries end of June.
Stuff. Yeah.
So this is and most of the talks and meetups that are happening, you can do these. You can watch them later on YouTube if you don't make it to the date, or you are in the wrong time zone or whatever.
Good meetup. Yeah.
Well, I popped in. Oh, go ahead.
Go on. I was just gonna say, it's like one point. Nils just touched on it then, and I sort of want to put a big fat underline under it, is that you write some CSS today, it'll still work in 20 years. You know, it's the browsers are like browser vendors are so good at making sure things just work all the time. As long as you stay on spec, you know, if you stay on spec, you're all good. Yeah, if you're using a, you know, I used to do grid layouts of inline block. That'll still work today. Some sites that I built 8-10 years ago, they still run and it's fine. Like there's no rush to learn the latest and greatest thing. When it's the right time, when it's the right time, when it's appropriate to do it, you'll find it. And Gap's another great thing there. Don't go back and start refactor your CSS. Well, do if you can, but like when you come to do a flex layout in the future projects, you're like, oh yeah, I can just use Gap now. And that moment where you realize that everything's just that little bit easier is good when that happens as well. I can't wait to like roll a container query out on a design system project. I've been whinging about it for so long that I can't wait to just be able to flexibly set some typography in a card element depending on how big the card is rather than how big my browser is. So yeah.
Yes.
Good stuff.
I think about this one quite a lot. And
the card's the one,
yeah. And you know, generally keeping on top of CSS, and for me, definitely curating Twitter is largely where I've, you know, definitely find out about things. I've subscribed to a few more newsletters recently. I've kind of embraced the newsletters as well, which I do not have the links handy, but another quick point about this show, we will be putting it, and by we I mean me, I will be putting it up on YouTube and including captions and everything. So I'll make sure to capture these links that we've talked about, and I'll pop in some newsletters that I, you know, definitely benefit from, helping me find out what's going on. But the other link I put in the chat was the working group's GitHub page, because this was new information to me that they have made a lot of this public, so you can see what's going on and actually comment, and particularly something like container queries, they want you to, you know, experiment with it and comment and let them know if you find a bug and all these kinds of things. So keep that in mind if that's something you're interested in. You know, I just appreciate that it's out in the open and it kind of pulls back that curtain of what's going on and what's coming. And I think the point about things, you know, they're moving exponentially faster this past year and going into next year than they have for a significant amount of CSS's history, which is definitely pros and cons. As you mentioned, stuff that you wrote 2 decades ago will still probably work decently, which is great. I find it interesting, and maybe I'll have to work this into one of the upcoming talks, but I find it interesting that when something is released in CSS, there's maybe a brief, you know, flurry of a couple articles, as we've seen with container queries, whereas if something's released in JavaScript, there's like a conference the next day, I swear. But and it is that, you know, there is a difference, so you have to wait for browser support, so there is kind of that hurdle versus some of the things that happen in JavaScript world, but it can make it seem, I think,